Hey, what's up, BTC fam? It's your Pleb next door, Saint Bitcoin. Welcome to Pleb Talk Podcast, where Bitcoiners worldwide will get their voices heard, stories shared, and take us on their very own journeys. This is episode 6, Freedom, Faith, and Bitcoin with BlakkBull. BlakkBull in the house. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, man? How's it going?
I'm doing very great, man. I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Another good day, So, family, God, stacking sats. I mean, what else you need?
Hey, man, Bible bullets and BTC.
I hear you, brother. I hear you.
No, man. So you told me that this is actually like your first podcast, your first episode that you've ever done with someone. So I'm very honored that I got to do it with you.
Yeah, man. New to me. So just looking forward to having a good convo and hopefully some people can connect and resonate with it.
No, definitely. We got to talk a little bit before this, and I know you have some very good opinions on things and some very good insight. But while we were talking, you kind of told me a little bit of your story, how you got into your own business, BlakkBull, how you got into Bitcoin, a little bit of your faith, and like how all this like ties together into an awesome story. So however you can explain that the best, I think it would be really good for everybody to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand someone's background, right? Because it kind of helps understand where someone's perspective is coming from. Everyone has a unique background. Mine, I grew up and I was fortunate to have a unique public education that most are not privy to, where I had an honors high school where debate and questioning things was not just encouraged, it was demanded. I mean, we had one class where they would put us all around a table and the teacher would just basically make us debate each other. Wow. And we would be reading things, philosophy. The one that really started off for me was Plato's Republic. As a high schooler, you can't really understand a lot of what that book is about, but what you can get is the process of questioning everything.
So this stuff was already starting to, you're already building a foundation at a young age.
Exactly. It frames you, right? You come from this frame perspective of, hey, question everything, find your own truth. Truth to you is adapting as you gather more information and data. And that's the process of what I would say the best way to think is you have to be willing to change, accept new data, vet new data. But that's how you always ensure yourself of the best chance to have a good perspective on something. So that book, The Plato's Republic, had a big impact on me. And another thing is I was fortunate to grow up and I got to travel a lot because of my parents. They had the money. We were able to go to Europe and then later in life I was able to go to South America, Canada, Mexico, all over the place. Europe several times.
So you've basically gotten to see the whole world.
A lot of it. I haven't seen Asia, which I really want to see.
I would really like to go. Yeah.
And Africa too. I want to see Africa very badly. I want to see everywhere. My wife loves to travel too. We're just so busy, but we will be continuing that passion of ours eventually.
Hey, man, Bitcoin fixes this.
That's right. It does fix this, right? And, traveling's so important. I studied abroad too. I studied abroad in undergrad. And I studied abroad in law school, too. For a portion of your study, you can study abroad. And so both of those were very beneficial because you're introduced to the academia aspect of other countries. So that was very important to me. And just undergrad, basic undergrad, and then law school. And the law school education, as we were talking about, was very impactful for me. It is a very different type of education where instead of memorizing and applying descriptive text, you have to dive into case material and basically facts as they're represented. And then you have to discover what the truth is to you. And then you have to represent certain truths that may be lesser truths at certain times. And you're tested in front of your peers every day. You have to feel like you know the truth of a case in multiple cases, and you can be called on spot and you can be grilled in front of everybody. And that kind of intellectual boot camp really helped develop me. I mean, we all have this, it's just that for me was very beneficial.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like I told you, I don't practice law. I'm an investor, and I
Mm.
sports bet for a living. But that just kind of started off, as I was telling you, in law school. I was fortunate to go to a good law school that was one of the first to start to offer courses in algorithmic law and basically quantitative analysis and building models to predict legal outcomes, which transitions well to sports betting because you're dealing with variables that are very difficult. They're very difficult to quantify and things that are very difficult to predict. And they're very similar. So that process was just kind of, it was a natural growth from the modeling law and legal outcomes to modeling sports events, which I love sports, have all
Nice,
my
nice.
life. And it's just, I always tell people, they say, well, do you love it? And, when you do it this long, a lot of people I'm sure can relate. You may lose the passion, but it's like, well, but it's the best way I've found to stay free and to provide for yourself and those you love. So,
Well, and what I like about you telling us your journey so far is that when you were in probably when you were just getting into law school, learning about this legal education, you didn't know that down the road it was going to lead you to the career you have now. So like it's cool to see this progression of the story you're telling us.
yeah, it just kind of naturally happens. And that's kind of, I came home from law school and, I was expected to take the bar, become a lawyer, but I was always working on my models, my market
Nice.
tech, as I
Yes.
call it, for
Yes.
sports, and
Yeah, you were working on your dreams after you got your responsibilities done.
I was, and I told you that one of the most impactful things to me in my life, which really changed me and other people who I've met who've had similar type of experiences, was the health situation I got into because I was too, how do you put it? I was a little too consumed by my models for a bit.
Okay.
I
Okay.
came home and I just, I was talking to you about the journey, the important spiritual journey was that I came home from academia and we were talking about how in upper academia, they try to mold you instead of let you just naturally grow.
True, true, very true.
Um, that applies to the legal education where now, even though the legal education, I love the process and I think it really helps you developmentally. The problem is that they teach you incorrect things.
Mm,
For instance, like the Constitution. Now they're trying to spur. I say they, as in the powers to be or whatever. We always use that they,
of
right?
course, of course.
But it's like they want you to think that judicial activism is the natural state of things and in alignment with the Constitution, and it's not.
Mm,
They teach you that the Constitution has different manners of interpretation, and you choose the one as a judge that you see fit. And if you're an attorney and you're advocating for a position in front of a certain judge, you have to know their manner of interpretation, and it's all BS because the facts are, if I dove into the Constitution in law school, I just loved it. I thought it has failed in our society right now, but it was the best attempt at that point to try to limit authority and power and restrictions on freedom. But when you look at what the founding fathers intended, their official discourse and their unofficial discourse between each other, they intended for original intent to be the only valid interpretation of the Constitution.
mm.
And it makes sense because, they're always trying to make the argument where, well, original intent adapts. No, the intent doesn't adapt. The modern circumstances and situation and environments adapt, and then the application adapts. But the intent is the same, right? And we'll talk about that later with firearms.
I was going to say that would go along with firearms, going back to faith. That would also go along with the Bible too. It's the same thing. The same kind of people are the same people trying to change the interpretations on everything we hold to us.
Right. And so if you understand that that's the case, the only way to get around that is you have to create these other manners of interpretation, which allow for judicial activists to do as they see fit and change it. I mean, that's the only thing, because it's like, this is it. This is how it was intended to be interpreted. It does adapt. The application of it adapts. But the only way to get around those constraints is you say, well, it's a living and breathing document. We can change. The intent's different now, right? And that, of course, doesn't make any sense. It's complete BS. But I don't know
Of
how we got
course.
around to that. But
No. That was great, man. That was awesome. I love hearing your opinions on things. One of the things I wanted to ask you was you've had this journey so far in life through academia, through your career, and a little bit of what I want to talk about is your Christian faith and how did that play a role in it? And do you see your faith, the ideals, the beliefs that you have, do you see that like flowing over into your studies, into Bitcoin, into your investing, into your business? Do you see that all flowing together in your life?
of course, it flows in everything I am. Everything I do are those principles because to me, the only authority I recognize is God. That's it. Man-made structures and centralized structures, we play nice with them. As Jefferson talked about, so, you put up as much restrictions on your liberty as you can to maintain peace and order. And we do that. Obviously, we do that because we don't agree with a lot of what the government does and laws, but we put up with as much as we can put up with. But I
Yeah.
don't recognize that authority. That's just trying to preserve peace between entities that I don't respect. The only authority over me is God and natural rights. And it's interesting because people, they get their perspective is from, it's hard to understand how it came to be where democracy is seen. It's seen as this big positive, but democracy is just trading one dictator for 100, 200 million. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody should be able to trample upon anyone's natural rights. I don't care if you have a country, let's just make it simple, of 100 people and 99 people think this person shouldn't be able to do that. As long as that person's not harming anybody in an active, violent, or aggressive way substantially, that person, he should be able to do what he wants to do. It doesn't matter
Agreed.
what the
Agreed.
99 people think,
That's
right?
his personal right and his liberty to live his
Exactly.
life.
But
And,
if you have a democracy, that's a strong,
yeah.
democracy majority. That's 99%, right?
So
So,
one of the things in my faith that I wanted to share with you that I guess I've taken with me the most in my investing, in my delving into Bitcoin, would actually just be simple conviction. I felt like through my faith over the last couple of years since I've been a Christian, I have developed a level of conviction and trust and lifestyle in a certain thing. And spilling that over into Bitcoin, I feel like I'm taking those same kind of ideals and beliefs with me, you know?
oh, I agree. It's discipline, right? And discipline and the conviction of what you believe in. People, in my perspective, rightfully believe in this Bitcoin thing, we call it. They believe strongly, have a lot of conviction. And I believe that, as God flows into Bitcoin, Bitcoin also flows into aspects of other people's lives. It's like this transitive state, right? You have this discipline from God for you and me, which flows into our discipline and conviction in Bitcoin. And then I've seen, we see all every day, that Bitcoin also has that effect on people too. That conviction, that belief, it goes into other
Yeah.
areas, in a
Yeah.
positive way. You see it transform people, And then I didn't want to. I just remembered the point because I didn't want to leave this open ended for people listening, was when I was talking about being consumed about my models, which
Okay.
was a bad thing. Yeah, I just want to clarify. It was a bad
Okay.
thing. Okay. I got out of academia. I was affected by a lot of the pseudoscience they teach you, right? I actually was atheist for a little bit. I grew up in the Protestant faith, and then as we have to take accountability. Like, I got fooled, right? I became atheist in my perspective,
Okay.
and I was consumed by my models at that time, and I was basically getting up every day. Basically my day would be, I would get up at 10 a.m. I would work all day. I would work out, work till 5 a.m., and then get up the next day and continue working on my models. And you could see that that's a disaster waiting to happen.
It's just a shifting in priorities, man. And I don't think, as a Christian to another Christian, I don't think you should sell yourself short and call yourself an atheist. The word says, who the sun sets free is free indeed. You're already free, and maybe you had some bad experiences in your path along the way, but that didn't define who you were.
Right. Well, I lost my way. You could put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. We
And
all do. We all do, right? We all do.
we all do. And what brought me back was actually one of the worst things in my life, where I got sick.
Okay.
And the doctors don't know. They didn't know. They kept telling me, I wish I could help you. I don't know what's wrong with you. But basically, one day I woke up and I was dizzy. I opened my laptop to start working. I was dizzy. And then my symptoms spiraled out of control to the point where I was in and out blurry vision, constant dizziness and tension everywhere, seeing doctors, getting spinal taps, whatever.
Wow.
And it was terrible. Like, I was just non-functional, trying to work on my models still.
Yeah.
And in the
Yeah,
hospital,
the models,
give me my
models.
laptop, and the mom being, you can't even see your screen, like, what are you doing? And I
Yeah.
had to learn how wrong that was. And this is an important point I wanted to make, was that, the strength that like a lot of Bitcoiners, they're very strong people.
I agree. Yes, I agree.
But the body, there's a difference in strength. For instance, like, you have this spiritual strength, whatever you want to call it. You and I call it spiritual strength,
Okay.
which is way stronger than what your body strength is. And I had to learn that there was no way my body could keep up with the spiritual strength and endurance I had that I was applying to this endeavor of in these models. It was going to break. My body was going to break. It couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had to take it upon myself to start eating better, to start getting better sleep, and all these types of things. I mean, now we're all learning about meat and the benefits of meat, and I'm becoming very meat heavy myself. But at the time,
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's becoming very evident now. But at the time, I didn't know, and so fruit was the big thing, and the Walls diet, and reducing inflammation. And so I would just take anything I could get my hands on that I felt like may reduce this inflammation in my body, and I would throw it in a blender. It was nasty. I would drink it down. But I was just trying to solve the problem on my own, because basically medical doctors were like, well, there's nothing you can do. You can take this antidepressant for some sleep to help your sleep and then get off of it, which is terrible advice. Don't take antidepressant.
No.
Clinically depressed. And then there's further arguments on that end too. But when you're certainly not clinically depressed, don't take an antidepressant. It was just awful. So I basically tried to naturally do it my own. I started meditating 40 minutes a day. And eventually I got myself to the point where I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, I want to go out to Vegas, to try this thing. It was very tough because they wanted me to be a lawyer, and sports betting has this very, what would you say, negative stigma around it, especially in a traditional household and family situation like I grew up in.
Yeah.
But she, the best mom in the world. I mean, I'm only here because of her, and she went with me. I was still a little dizzy, helped me get set up in Vegas, and then I started my journey there, and the model was extremely successful that year. I mean, that was probably the best year I've ever had, which to me is just all about kind of my faith, because I told you I can't go into all the things that kind of affected me with my faith, but that time of recovering, fighting constantly for a year, and being afraid that, like, hey, I may not wake up tomorrow, or I may wake up blind. I'm having vision issues, like going through that experience. And it definitely connected me to God. I had some experiences which is hard to explain to people, about how you kind of realize that truth.
It's very encouraging to hear that, not only that you didn't give up the fight in your journey, but that God never gave up the fight on you as well.
Oh, that's right. That's how I feel. I'm only here. I really feel like, God saved me. I feel like there's no way. It was looking so bleak. There's no way I could have possibly healed from where I was to where I am now, to operating. I always will have a little bit of tension in my head always. It's just the way it is. But I'm just so blessed to be healed to this point where I can function optimally. And, you know, I didn't think I was going to have a life, and now I have the most wonderful life. And I was telling you that what really solidified me with God was meeting my wife in Vegas.
Nice.
Her, you know,
Nice.
it's to me, it's God is that love, right? It's love.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
meeting someone like my wife who showed me that love. And
You know, the word says that he who finds a wife has found a good thing and has obtained favor with God.
yeah, that's right. Well, she's more American than anyone I know, immigrated here under the most brave circumstances. I mean, this is just someone who, and I hope everyone feels this way about their wife, who I just admire and respect more than anybody. And she taught me so much, and her love transformed me, and she really brought me close to God. And she'll even tell you, like, when she first met me, like, yeah, I was spiritual, but I wasn't like I am now, where have a high level conviction, and I'm very strong with my faith, and she's the reason. You know, her love and her bringing me close to God, and that influence she's had really made me who I am today. And as we talked about earlier, it affected every area of my life. It's made me able to have conviction with things like Bitcoin that I believe in, that is going to help people around the world bring freedom. Because I see Bitcoin. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast with American Hodl. We all know him; he's a character. But he was talking about this is warfare, and it is warfare.
It is, yeah, monetary warfare.
It is absolute warfare. And people, when you talk to someone, we have to talk to them from an investment standpoint, because that's how they get interested. They're like, oh, well, I can buy this, and it's going to be worth this, and I can preserve my wealth. And hey, that's true, and that's important. But to me, this is absolute warfare. It's freedom. It's like my ancestry goes a long way in American history. You know, my ancestor got off the boat, and it was 1776 or 1777. I'm not sure the exact date. And they found out that we were fighting these redcoats, and he said, sign me up. These people have been holding us back and restraining our liberties for too long. You know, and that's the way Bitcoin is. You know, it's like I discovered Bitcoin, and it's like, sign me up. These central banks, they've been restricting our liberties and holding back humanity for too long. It's time to pick up our arms, our Bitcoin, and hold them till death and fight. And
So
yeah.
for me as a young person with my whole life ahead of me, it's really encouraging to hear your story of getting to where you are today. And it's extremely awesome to be able to be talking with like-minded people like you. You know, how we're connected through Bitcoin, because, you know, Bitcoin really is going to change the world. And going along with that, I had a couple more questions for you, actually. Bitcoin as a store of value or a medium of exchange. Obviously, it's not going to be a medium of exchange without being a reliable store of value first. But regarding the value proposition of both of those use cases within money, which one strikes a chord with you the most, and why? Bitcoin revolutionizing the way we save money against a failing centralized system, or the way we spend and transact value on a global level?
Right. Well, the trick is, right, that you don't even have the latter part without the former part. So, like, you have to have a store of value before you can have a reliable medium of exchange. And that's something, I guess you would say, that the charlatans in this industry kind of use to try to deceive people and made a lot of money off of, saying, well, you know, we can do transactions this fast or whatever. But the bottom line is, if something's not innately valuable, as in value, as in it can store your value well, and Bitcoin better than anything else, then people are not going to hold it. And if people don't hold it, they're not going to use it as a medium of exchange. So the store value proposition is crucial. It's I always recommend the Bitcoin Standard, Saifedean's great book, and the reason I love the book is he is an educator. He's not trying to say, oh, Bitcoin's great, let me tell you why. He's like, hey, let me teach you about money, and let me teach you the why, and why we we need it. Not we want it. Not, oh, Bitcoin's cool, let's do it. No, we need this thing. And in order to show you we need it, I got to tell you why. And he goes through the monetary history, and then he talks about Bitcoin. And he goes through the stages, right? You go collectible, store of value, medium of exchange, and then unit of account. And so, collectible, we know what collectible is, store of value. It has to preserve you feel comfortable, like your value that you've accrued, the human capital you've put forth, the time you've spent with creating a valuable service or a product. And you have to know that, that time is your property. That's the property of work, the time you've spent. And
that is your proof of work.
Of course, that's right. And you have to be able to store that reliably. And you go from that to medium of exchange to where, okay, everyone has these stores of value, they're proof of works, and they need different types of services from other people providing value. And that's how we scale. And I'm confident that everyone can store their contributions to society with this thing called Bitcoin. And then we can exchange, and, we can scale. And then eventually when it gets widely used enough, it's a unit of account. Everybody's using it. Well, we may as well price things in it because, everybody's going to store and use it anyway. But of course, the store value is the most important. And another reason why is because we have to protect against theft. Medium exchange is not being able to just send something to some person is not going to protect you from theft. The store of value properties of Bitcoin, it's protecting you from inflation. It's set schedule of 21 million, set supply, I should say, finite supply of 21 million. It protects you against the most insidious of all thefts, inflation, which is so insidious because people don't even realize it's happening. And then outright theft, if your government grows to such a tyrannical extent that they're trying to tax you to a certain extent or for certain things that you don't agree with, they don't have your private keys. You have your private keys. If you have your private keys, if you're storing your private keys properly, they can't take your Bitcoin. And if you have some type of business that they frown upon because maybe it's a freedom type business that they're trying to restrict, that's important, but they want to restrict. But if you use a money like Bitcoin to transact in, they can't shut you down. WikiLeaks found that out. They had to resort to Bitcoin, and a lot of other industries. We've seen. I remember we were talking about the gun industry as well. I was going to gravitate.
Yep. We're going to get into that. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so that store value is. I mean, the thing is I tell people, like, if we never scale to medium exchange, which we will, like don't get me wrong, we will do that. But if we never did,
just the fact of having a reliable store of value for the whole world to use that's world changing right there.
Exactly. That's the thing. If all we ever did was have the best store of value in the world, which we already do, and the only reason it's volatile is because we're so early in the adoption phase that people have not recognized it and priced it accordingly, right? Like any asset, like sports, I identify a team, it's of this strength, people don't recognize it, the price is off. Same thing with Bitcoin. We already have the best store of value in the world. People just don't realize it, so the price is not in alignment with its true value, right? But we already have the best store of value in the world, and all it ever does is just be the best store of value in the world. I mean, it's already served its purpose. It's already transformed society. We can protect ourselves against, theft through inflation, taxation. We can protect ourselves from confiscation and censorship. But another important thing that Bitcoin does, I want to make sure not to forget about this, is that it helps us as a society and as human beings, we move forward. Right now, we can't move forward because the financial system we're in, the incentives are all out of whack, and this lending and this Keynesian system, it creates malinvestment.
Debt keeps growing larger, bills keep becoming more expensive, life keeps becoming harder.
Right, and it's like if you're an institution, there's no consequence to your actions, right? So it's like, I'm going to liken it to sports betting because I deal with it every day. It's like you can think of whatever you want about sports betting, but if I take a position on a team and I'm wrong, I have a consequence. I lose my money. And if I don't learn from that, I'm going to go broke. So I better learn from my consequences. I'm going to feel the hit. Whereas we saw in 2007 and now, because nothing's changed, a bank makes irresponsible lending decisions. They invest in things that don't really warrant an investment, and there's not a consequence because they'll just get bailed out.
To get a bailout from Big Brother.
Right. And who's Big Brother? It's your money.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are bailing them out, right? So enforcing the consequences, no. We're going to have a sound money supply. You're free to make whatever decisions you choose. But if you make those decisions with Bitcoin, you have a consequence. You lost your Bitcoin. And you don't get to get bailed out by our Bitcoin.
Puts the responsibility into your own hands.
Exactly. And that consequence and incentives are just so important. That's what's going to enable us to finally move forward. Right now, we're stuck. You can see it in entertainment. My wife is in entertainment, and she, we talk about this all the time. You can see the art, the modern art, and Safedine talks about it in his book too, is that modern art stinks, man. And it's just pushing these terrible values, terrible morals. It's trying to get people to spend money on things that they don't need. And they have to work their little butts off to obtain all these things that they don't need. And they wonder why they're miserable. And they wonder why everything around them and the quality of art and products, they're not any good. And why people are treated poorly in business. And in the corporate setting, people are abused and they're mistreated because they value creation. True value creation is not valued anymore. And that's what Bitcoin does. It brings the consequences, the incentives back.
Come out of this world and be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Unplug from the matrix.
That's right. That's what it is, man. We're all the Neos. We're waking up.
Nice. Yeah. First of all, man, I want to say I appreciate you. Me and you definitely have a lot in common. I felt like I've made a new friend already, man. I appreciate you.
Oh, for sure.
You're a freedom zealot, an American. You love the Constitution. I really love to hear your economic forecast from you regarding the American economy, the elections. We got the next 2 Bitcoin halving cycles coming up. What this means for the American people. And as we start to see, different countries around the world, we start to see people revolting, people protesting. We start to see a mass awakening of people just starting to realize the corruption around them. What are the things you see, man, from your perspective?
Oh, yeah, for sure, right? Like Bitcoin is the red pill, so to speak. I mean, people are waking up all around the world, and then if they get a hold of Bitcoin, oh my gosh, their heads, I've seen it. Like you see people, their brains become a sponge. They transform in months. And Bitcoin is that red pill that's just going to spread. But in terms of our economic situation, right? Well, nothing's changed from 2007, except that it's just gotten worse. We have an increased debt bubble. We still have the same malinvestment and irresponsible lending that we had then. And there seems to be no political motivation or incentive to stop it because everybody just wants to, of course, governments just want more power and they can use the current financial system to keep power over people with, control over the monetary system. Or, central banking is the biggest puppet master on top of all these political regimes. But in terms of economically, well, it's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely not looking good, but at least you have a life raft, I hesitate to make any forecasts because I tell you, way back before Bitcoin, I was screaming, we have a problem,
Yeah.
And then we did have a problem, and then they just fixed it, quote unquote. They didn't fix it, of course, by plugging bubble gum in the dam and making the problem even worse, but basically delaying the pain, which was just going to make the pain even more so. But so nothing's changed from that. I still have a very grim outlook on I mean, the current financial system is dead. It's just how long can they basically keep it alive?
I don't believe that Bitcoin needs anything else to be great, just like we were talking about, just a reliable form of savings that the whole world can use. That's already world changing, but I do think we're going to see some crazy things in the world over the next couple years, and I do believe that some of those things are going to play a factor in people adopting Bitcoin in their lives.
I agree with you. We're going to have severe financial strife around the world in banking and in government and in all types of things. And you're seeing that already. In Iran, they they burned down a bank.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, hey guys, just buy Bitcoin. It's more effective and it's less dangerous.
I woke up and logged into Twitter and I seen that they were burning the Bank of Iran down. I said, okay, well.
And of course, we had to do better work over there with the internet access because, of course, the government takes down the internet, and you can't be but so hard on them because it's like, well, they don't have internet access, and it's tough. And I think all of us together,
Well, I think internet access and access to Bitcoin, that kind of adoption is it's hand in hand. It's going to keep growing.
That's right, and that innovation is going to continue. Whether things like the mesh networks and all these type of things that I'm definitely not a technical expert on, but that I know brilliant people are and working on, and we're going to find solutions to these issues and help these freedom things like the internet and Bitcoin. Internet really decentralized information. Before the internet, you had very controlled dissemination of information. The internet just blew a hole through that, and Bitcoin did that with money. Right? We had centralized dissemination or control of money. And then Bitcoin blew a hole through that. We're decentralizing that. And I'm confident that we have just so many brilliant people and free-minded people all throughout the world that we're going to continue to innovate and find ways to protect these freedom mechanisms. And it's important not just in America. As you're asking about America and the Constitution, and to me, America, like that's an idea. America is an idea. It's a powerful idea. It's that Bitcoin really is America on the blockchain, right? I mean,
America
forcing the American ideal that those natural rights and protection of, which all goes back to property rights, and what Bitcoin protects those property rights, and that's forcing that throughout the world, so anyone, no matter what type of situation or regime you are all around the world, you can pick up those arms, that Bitcoin, and you can fight for your freedom.
I love it, dude. I love it. That was awesome.
Exporting America with Bitcoin, man. It's a beautiful thing.
So with the elections coming up, let's just say, after, let's just say by 2025, how prevalent do you see Bitcoin being in society? Let's say American society and international society. Do you really see a massive adoption over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I do. I think by 2025 we will. It's just inevitable. Bitcoin factually is the hardest money in the world. And unlike in previous times where it was kind of it was easier to kind of hide the accounting of a hard asset like Bitcoin. Now it's out in the open, right? And you can't hide the accounting. It's there. We can see it. So I do see people are just going to find this thing called Bitcoin, and they're going to, as they use it, because it's one thing to want to use Bitcoin and to think it's cool, but it's another thing to be like, no, Bitcoin solves this. Like I'm having hyperinflation in my country, and I need Bitcoin, right? You find that out real quick.
That's where some of your whys and your conviction and the reason you're doing things start to come into play, and why Bitcoin is important to you and the people around you.
Right. And even in the United States, where we have the most privileged financial position, like you're still losing 2% of your wealth if you store it in cash, bro.
That's very true.
That's a losing bet. It is a for sure losing bet, worst bet in the world. Why would you make that bet?
Might as well just stack sats.
And then so you're forced to speculate, and a lot of people can't do that, even though the Cash App is helping bring access to the stock market to more people, which is wonderful. But still, you're forced to kind of take these high risk gambles in these already inflated assets.
Things are becoming more expensive. Bills are getting more expensive. Life gets a little bit harder.
Right. The Cantillon effect is happening. We're having this widened wealth gap, and the only really safe bet for you is Bitcoin. And people are going to realize that all you do is just hold it. You go, you store it properly, hold your own private keys, and just hold it. You don't have to speculate. You don't have to hire anybody to manage it. Just hold it. And as people wake up to its protection mechanisms against inflation, confiscation, and censorship, that's the most valuable use case in the world. I mean, nothing else is going to protect you like Bitcoin from these things. And these other things are just going to get more and more aggressive as these institutions, run into problems, and they're just going to escalate those weapons against us, those weapons of inflation, censorship.
Hodling seems like an easy task when you talk about it, but sometimes it's the hardest thing for people to understand.
Yeah, well, I think the concept, right, is simple. The implementation is incredibly difficult, right? And that's the same way I approach sports betting. Is it's very difficult to find people who win, okay, and to build a model that wins, right? But once you do, the concept is simple. Same thing with Bitcoin. That's why I'm drawing this comparison, is that once you do find something crazy valuable like Bitcoin, right? It's simple. Hold it. Hold it as securely as possible, right? Hold your own private keys. Just hold it. But the thing is that the discipline it takes is so hard. It's so hard because, especially now where we're in the early stages of the most disruptive asset in human history. I mean, think about that, right? I mean, if you're holding any type of disruptive asset, it's going to be crazy volatile. You look at a company like Amazon, look at that chart, right? But I mean, like, we're talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about disrupting central banking. That type of asset, the volatility, of course, is going to be off the charts, and it has been, right?
So for me and you as Christians, it's a very similar concept of believing in the gospel in a society and in a world that very much doesn't like that message.
Right. That's right. We live in a world where it's all high time preference, spin, spin, spin. I was in Miami on vacation, and I was talking to a guy, and he was like, "Yeah, he's like, it's crazy, man. Like, some people here, they'll rent and live in a closet just so they can afford to rent their Lamborghini so they look good." And that's how it is right now. Everybody, they just want to look good. They don't want to actually be good. They want to look good, or they want to be accepted, or they want to, I don't know, man. The values are all out of whack.
Well, Bitcoin is here to make that shift in society.
Hey, bro, Bitcoin fixes this. I mean, it does. I get annoyed by it, but it's true. Like, it's hard to find something. I mean, yeah, there's some absolute things Bitcoin can't fix, like loss of a loved one, whatever, but besides that and those type of things, Bitcoin probably fixes it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So I wanted to get to talk to you a little bit about firearms because I know that's something you're passionate about. I got a couple questions for you, but I would just like to know how you got into firearms. Like what got you pumped up about it? What got you involved in enjoying that hobby, that lifestyle, those beliefs, owning a firearm?
Gotcha. Okay, so that's multi-tiered. So I shot my first gun as a 22. It was an old 22 with my grandfather, and he taught me how to shoot. And we would take that 22 out. We start off with empty Pepsi cans, and then went to squirrel hunting and things like that. And then my uncle took me deer hunting, and then I went hunting with friends, and it's kind of, I grew up in it, so I'm very comfortable with firearms. You kind of fear what you don't understand, right, or that you're unfamiliar with. I'm very comfortable with it, and it's been part of my life. But I wasn't as, oh man, as, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say fanatical, but I didn't have the conviction I do in firearms until I went to law school and dove into the Constitution and realized why it's so important. Why the Second Amendment is so important. People don't realize they get caught up with, Britain, England, they lost their firearm rights because they basically kept conceding things, which is what we're doing now, is they kept conceding incorrect things about this natural right to your self-defense. They said, oh, well, it's for hunting. And people kind of were like, oh, well, it's for hunting, so I can keep my hunting rifle, whatever.
Slowly chipping away at it.
Right. Then eventually, well, what do you need that for hunting? Right. So you don't need that for hunting, though. So you said that it's for hunting, and you don't need that for hunting. Right. So we can take this away, too. And it chipped away. And that's how it is. So it's very important to understand the Second Amendment. And gosh, the Second Amendment, we could go days and days over the Second Amendment. So I won't get too into detail on the Second Amendment, as I have a tendency to, because it's a passion of mine. But I will say the Second Amendment, it means what it says. Okay. It confers an individual right. It doesn't confer. I'm saying that incorrectly. It recognizes, that's an important distinction. It recognizes the individual right to bear arms. Right? It doesn't recognize the militia's right. It recognizes every individual's right in order to preserve a militia in society. That militia being a check on centralized force, that being the government military force. So the militia being basically the aggregate of all individuals in our society. Every competent adult has that natural right to bear arms. And the right to bear arms is intended by our founding fathers in the Constitution for you to have the same arm that your oppressor may have, So your government, which could turn oppressive, as we've seen, hundreds of millions of deaths attest to this important check, is you have to have, at the minimum, the same commonly used arm of what could be your adversary, a government infantryman, right? And if you look at what our government infantrymen are having, they have an automatic rifle, which is what the Second Amendment protects. Now, we've conceded that because a lot of people say, well, it's kind of the same thing, but to a lesser extent, as our brothers and sisters over in England, well, we don't really need an automatic weapon to protect ourselves. And
we already went too far with the automatic thing.
We went way too far. But the thing is how they see it. I'm just rationalizing what they did was they just said, well, in most battlefield contexts, semi-automatic's more effective. So, okay, whatever, you can have the automatic, which was a mistake and it was bad. And that's why right now we're at the line, because in order for a militia to be effective, i.e. the aggregate of free individuals in our society, to provide that check against a potential government tyranny. And, this is not a pretend threat. It is literally the most violent and deathly force on the planet by human beings. What do they say? Hundreds of millions will attest of deaths around the world. It is the most important check we have, and we already conceded automatic weapons, which, some battlefield contexts, automatic weapons are more effective. But at the bare minimum, you cannot give up semi-automatic rifles.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, if you do that, you're fighting a losing battle. We'll have the numbers, but it's very hard to have an effective fighting force, which is what a militia is, against a oppressive regime if you can't match them at least with a semi-automatic rifle. It's just not really you're really stacking the deck against you're against yourself then. So to me, that's the line. Like it cannot be crossed. And, I don't know I can't speak for other people, even though I do know a lot of people feel the same way as I do. That's the line. Like, I don't care what law you pass. You can't have my semi-automatic rifle, my AR-15. You can't have it. You can't have the 30-round magazines. You can't have the ammunition with it. You just can't have it. I don't care what thing you write on paper. You can't have it, right? And it's my defensive mechanism, right? We all want to live a peaceful society, and we hope that that's a strong enough deterrent, right, to prevent further aggression. And we hope that that's all it ever has to be, is just a deterrent, right? But in order for it to be a valid deterrent, you have to have the capability that if, God forbid, we had some terrible situation, that the free men and women of this country have to have the capability of resisting that type of violent, oppressive force.
You have to use your rights in the Constitution.
Right, and that's what the Second Amendment is. I want to emphasize, it's a recognition of that inalienable right that you have by just the fact that you're a human being. Those are your natural rights. It didn't come from government. They're not privileges. Those are your natural rights. And the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights they are just recognizing those rights as a type of peaceful contract between us, the people, and our government, which is supposed to serve us. It's like them saying, okay, we recognize these rights that you have, and we're not going to trample upon them. That's what the Bill of Rights is. It's not how people see it now as in, hey, we're going to let you have these. No. These are natural rights we have by the fact that we're human beings. And that if you transgress upon these rights frequently enough, then we have the right to take them back. And
so I can see very much how your love for firearms and your love for the Constitution and the Second Amendment goes hand in hand with your love for Bitcoin and sound money and freedom and personal sovereignty and family and everything. I can see how it all ties in together for you, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like Bitcoin, it protects our store of value, protects it from theft. Thou shalt not steal, protects people from stealing from us. But the thing is, well, what protects my Bitcoin? And that's my firearm, because, hey, look, you can store your Bitcoin, but someone can come to you with a gun to your head and say, well, you better give me your Bitcoin, right? And you better be able to defend yourself. Force will always be out there. And unfortunately, aggressively violent people will centralize to try to forcefully take something from you, which is why we need the militia. It is that group of people that can protect against that centralized threat of force. So it definitely goes in hand. Bitcoin protects our store of value, what we've worked for, that shouldn't be taken from us without our permission. And then our firearms protect that protection mechanism of Bitcoin from people physically, forcefully taking that value from us. So, yeah, it goes hand in hand, brother.
I really hope I see more Bitcoiners in the future get into firearm culture. I know some Bitcoiners in certain countries can't participate in those things like, just the awareness and the education. And, if you're able to own one, there's no reason why you shouldn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, they can't legally. I mean, plenty of people around the world do illegally, like which laws. There's nothing. There's more unjust laws than just laws out there. So when I say
of course,
illegally, to me, illegal does not have a negative connotation. I mean, it makes me so upset about how many nonviolent people we have in prison.
That's the truth.
It's so wrong that you should not be put in a cage unless you aggressively or violently tried to harm someone, or harm someone to a significant extent. And we put so many people in a cage, and I say a cage because prison doesn't represent the truth of the matter enough. We put too many people in cages for things that other people, a majority of people, they just don't like. But, there's a lot of things I don't like, but I'm not going to put someone in a cage for it. And we've gotten so used to in society of dissociating ourselves from the violence It's kind of like, to put it on a smaller scale, like even like when you eat meat, and meat is so good for you, but like people, they're disconnected from the actual act of, you got to go. We respect our fellow creatures on this earth, but we need to eat, and that's the best nutrition for us, and so we do have to hunt and kill them for our sustenance, and we respect that animal, and we should be using up as much of that meat in that body as we can. But that is necessary. That act of killing, is necessary for us, and it's a serious thing. It's a serious decision where I have to eat, or I'm going to die. So of course I have to go hunt, and I respect this creature. It is providing me this sustenance. It's a serious thing. And people, for some reason, don't do that with law and politics. Like, they don't think like, oh, I'm going to create this law to force people to do this. And they don't think that what I'm doing is, when I create a law, I'm saying that if someone violates this law, I'm okay with going to their house at gunpoint and saying, hey, if you don't abide by this law, I'm going to put you in a cage for it, right? Or if you don't comply, I'm going to shoot you dead. And I know I'm being blunt here, but you got to be blunt, because otherwise people don't get the point. And when they create these laws, they talk about gun confiscations, or trying to put people in cages for their life, or a plant, or whatever it is. And I don't even smoke, man. I don't smoke or drink. But hey, man, if you want to, that's your deal. If you're not harming anybody, I don't care. I'm certainly not willing to go to someone's house at gunpoint and tell them, well, you have to go into a cage because I don't like what you're doing, or I think you're making a bad health decision. I mean, that's ridiculous. And that's what people are doing there. As I like to tell people, they're delegating their violence, right? Like, you're talking about gun control. What you're talking about is killing millions of people who will not willingly give up their firearms.
Gun control has never led to anything peaceful.
It never has. It's only led to more violence. We know this. And, I don't want to go off on a tailspin here, but like the thing, I've really stopped debating guns, because it's just like the other side, the freedom restrictive side, like they don't have a leg to stand on. Like, they're wrong factually. There's a negative correlation between gun ownership and violent crime rates, not just domestically, but throughout the world. Guns are used far more often in defense of a life than to criminally take one. I know the CDC studies 6 times, but the thing is that study doesn't even account for the fact that most of the time when a gun is used in self-defense, it's drawn and not fired. And so that's a difficult metric to quantify. But if they try to quantify that, and you get to like a gun is used 40 to 80 times more often in defense of a life, basically to prevent a life from being harmed, than to harm one. And to me, that's just an enormous, not to me, factually, that is an enormous net benefit to society. It's the great equalizer. If you're a woman, you're not as strong in general. Ladies, I'm not trying to say some women aren't very strong. In general, factually, women are not as physically strong as men. It just goes down to biology, right? And so a firearm is the great equalizer. Now you can defend yourself against anyone, right? It is protecting your liberty from being forcefully restricted just by someone being larger than you.
You have that tool there, and you know what? Hopefully you never have to use it ever, but you know what? It's there every single day of your life.
That's the thing, right? It's that fire extinguisher. Like, you hope you never have to use it, but you better train with it. Mm-hmm. Like, I drive fire practice every day, and I know how to use mine, and I hope I never, ever have to use it. It's the most worst thing to think of, is having to use it, but you need, if the time comes where you do have to use it, if you face what I call an asocial threat versus an antisocial threat. Like, hey, look, guys, and we all know this, but it's just important to emphasize, like, someone disagrees with you or is trying to get in a fight with you, walk away. Like, who cares? Like, I don't care. Like, you disagree with me about something, you want to fight, hey, man, go fight with yourself. Like, I don't care. I'm talking about a situation where someone is criminally really trying to take your life, and there's nothing you can do to prevent that. And it happens quick. You have a couple seconds when you are facing a threat where someone just is criminally trying to take your life or seriously do you bodily harm.
I think the FBI statistic is 95. I think it's like 95% of deadly encounters that happen between people, it happens in less than 3 seconds.
Right. And you have to be prepared like you do. But the truth is, though, because I don't want to discourage people from owning a firearm. The truth is, though, even if you don't train, just having a firearm on your person still is going to greatly increase your probability of survival. I mean, point and fire. You should train. You should, because you should be a responsible gun owner, and that's important. But it's still, if you have a firearm on your person, you drastically increase your chances of survival. But we do all have, as a gun owner, a responsibility to practice and to, of course, be responsible like you do with anything. You drive a car.
Agreed.
You better drive your car safely. I mean, we all know the value of cars, and of course, cars kill way more people than firearms. And I won't go into a spiel on that, but but the fact is, any tool, no matter how valuable, can be used irresponsibly. So we need to encourage responsible use, of course. And honestly, being around the gun community, I mean, I'm not around many communities that are as responsible as the gun community. It's most people are just incredibly
very, very responsible, humble, down to earth people.
I mean, and if you look at the statistics, like CCW holders are basically the most law-abiding citizens in society.
Mm.
And that's actually different than cops.
Who
are not as law-abiding as CCW holders, of course. Even though they're very good cops out there who I respect, but and who live up to their oath of protecting the Constitution, because they do take that oath. And a lot of them that would not enforce any restriction on the Second Amendment, thank goodness, and a lot of military personnel who believe the same. But unfortunately, we have a lot of cops that are not like that, and who would restrict your Second Amendment right, and who do every day. And it's important to bring exposure to a lot of those crimes that are committed by law enforcement and our military too. We have to be accountable for our actions. It's very important that's how you foster good in society, is that we have to be accountable for the mechanisms in our society that are corrupt, and we have to say, hey, look, this institution, it may do a lot of good, but it's doing a lot of bad here, and we need to correct it. And I feel like people on both sides, they get they get so polarized that they're not willing to admit fault in certain areas of things. And they really need to, because that's how we grow and correct society, is we say, hey, look, this is wrong. Like this police brutality, we have a problem with it. I'm not saying all police are bad. I'm saying we have a problem with police brutality, and some are bad. And a lot of great policemen are completely in agreement with me on this, in agreement with us when we say, hey, look, we have a problem with police brutality, and we need to keep talking about it so that we can tackle that issue, because that's an issue I feel like Bitcoiners are very focused on too, is the violence of the state.
Yes.
And we do need to focus on that. We do need to bring exposure to that, because that's how you start to limit it, right? And
I think a lot of Bitcoiners in the future are going to be some movers and shakers in society, and I think they're going to be making some positive changes.
Oh, I agree. And of course, those are the symptoms. The violence of the state are the symptoms, and then eventually we have to get towards the cause, which is basically criminalizing things that are not violent and that shouldn't be criminalized, and that you have to ask yourself the question. I know we're going off on a rant here, but you have to ask yourself the question of, am I willing to put someone in a cage for this? And if you're not, then it shouldn't be a law. And furthermore, if it's something that's not violent, that's not harming anyone, and you are willing to put someone into a cage for it, then you're not a good person.
The dilemma with that is, what to put somebody in a cage for is going to be subjective from person to person. So what basis of truth do you have to base that on?
Right. So basically, that's what we have these natural rights for. That's our foundation of truth, is that certain people have certain inalienable rights that cannot be violated. And that entails your property rights. That entails, of course, your property of a firearm or your right to speech, or and Bitcoin is code. I mean, that's speech. Firearms, that's property. So basically, these rights, your right to pursuit of happiness, as we would say in the Declaration of Independence, that cannot be trampled upon unless you are harming someone. I remember in law school, like it gets so complicated, but I always used to tell people, like, the Constitution is very simple. Like, our laws are very, very simple. It all goes down to this one principle, is that you should be allowed to do whatever you want to do, unless what you want to do is going to significantly harm other people's rights to do what they want to do. That's it. It's very simple. And so we are putting people in cages for things that are not harming people. And that's wrong. And we have to correct that. It is, it's not going to be a quick process, but the world is waking up. As you said, we have a lot of social strife around the world right now.
I really do see some of these issues changing over time as more people start to wake up to all this corruption.
Oh, absolutely. The internet was the start. Like, people don't realize, like, we're still feeling the after effects of the creation of the internet right now. Like, the internet, yeah, it was created a while back, but like we still are feeling those initial aftershocks. That's the reason why Bitcoin is here. That's the reason why we're having these social issues around the world, and people who are, burning down banks or protesting. I mean, it's all around the world now. We have a protest in France nobody's talking about. Iran burned down their bank. Hong Kong, we have this courageous fight in Hong Kong right now. All these things, they're the aftershock of the decentralization of the dissemination of information, where people can now go out and find the truth as best as they can. And we're in this process right now of the world they have access to their own information, and they can go out. And I'm not saying there isn't a lot of propaganda out there, and there's a lot of course, misinformation out there. But the fact is that unlike before, they now have the ability to go out and search for the truth and obtain their own information. And because they can do that, it is going to radically transform the world and society. And we're seeing the first stages now. This is just the start. I mean, it is just a very, I remember my dad was driving to the airport one day. I was coming back to Vegas, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, Dad, how different is the world today than when you were my age?" And he was just talking about, oh my gosh, he's going on about all the different differences. And I was just thinking, man, can you imagine when we're my dad's age? We're going to look back at this time, you and I talking, and all of us together in this amazing revolution called Bitcoin. And we're going to look back and just be like, wow, like we knew, but man, we didn't know. I
don't even think we can fathom right now what the world and what society and what changes and what everything's going to look like then.
Exactly, man. I mean, like, you talk about 2025, like, I think 2025, we're going to look back and be like, whoa.
Yeah, yeah. Even just 5-6 years from now, I couldn't imagine 20 or 40.
Yeah. I mean, because, I'm a big, of course, I'm into market technicals. I think most TA in the Bitcoin market is just a bunch of bunk. But I will tell you, the metrics I respect are the Mayer multiple.
Nice.
That's really,
classic.
I would liken that to like some sports betting metrics that I use. And the stock to flow, which again, I have metrics like that for sports. It's even though it is its purpose, I would say the Mayer multiple is more. I guess I can make more of a comparison to some sports things, but fundamentally, the stock to flow model, I definitely see similarities between those basic principles of what it does, and of course the stock to flow only applies to those hard assets that like Bitcoin, that.
Yeah.
But those are the only two metrics I see of value: Mayer multiple and stock to flow. Everything else is bunk, and You know,
if you're involved in Bitcoin and you're living by those two things, man, I'm sure you're going to do just fine.
yeah, I mean, those are the only metrics I would look at besides the fundamentals. Like fundamentally, we know how valuable Bitcoin is. You know, obviously, we can go through all those metrics of how the basics. I always tell people is the protection mechanisms against inflation, censorship and confiscation. Those are the fundamentals. And then, of course, it's incredibly detailed in how it does that. You know, and that makes Bitcoin so valuable. And then if you want other metrics that can help you, Mayer multiple, stock to flow. The stock to flow is an excellent metric, you know, because it is for that type of asset, that unforgeable, scarce asset like Bitcoin, and it only applies to those unforgeable, scarce asset like Bitcoin. It doesn't apply to anything else, but it's targeting on that metric of the stock to flow, because in economic terms, if something gets more valuable, people will try to produce more of it. And the unique thing about Bitcoin, unlike anything else, is the more valuable it gets, you cannot flood the market with more supply than what
Can't
is
flood the
dictated
model.
by the
Yeah.
code. Right? It's set. That's what makes it so unique. Anything else, it's like, okay, you know, let's get more. Like silver is a joke. I mean, I can just turn on those mining operations and just flood the market with more silver. Gold, of course, has been a very good store of value, which I respect because it's hard to produce. It's hard to create a more of a flow to offset price increases, but you can more than Bitcoin.
But everyone has to fight over the same amount of Bitcoin.
Right, and soon Bitcoin's going to match gold stock to flow, and then in 5 years it'll surpass it. I mean that's just
That's wild.
It's never happened. You know,
Yeah.
And unlike gold, where you can create, you can kind of hide the supply, you can't do that with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So that's huge when you talk about Bitcoin versus gold. It's gold. You can hoard it, hide the supply. You can issue a lot of titles of ownership to it. Then there is actual physical gold. But with Bitcoin, you know, like, hey, look, we have an open accounting of our finite hard money, unlike gold, and we're gonna test your accounting every year. And if you're fudging something,
we're gonna see who's real and who's fake.
That's right, and we can do that with Bitcoin, unlike gold, and that's what separates Bitcoin by mountains over gold, and of course the other things with gold's weakness of being physical in nature and all the weaknesses of that. Being more easily confiscated. I mean, ask someone trying to take their life savings from one country to another how easy it is to do it with gold and with Bitcoin, you know, and ask how hard it is to send gold versus Bitcoin to someone or to a loved one in another country or another part of the world. I mean, you know, it just makes me laugh, you know, like Peter Schiff, however you say his name. You know, I used to respect him, and then it just seems like he's just clung to that antiquated notion of gold being a store of value, and it's been usurped by Bitcoin. It's not even close. And the fact is that the wealth of the world is going to gravitate towards the hardest asset. That's the lesson we have from monetary history. To paraphrase Saifedean, is that you cannot protect yourself of the consequences of other people holding harder money than yours. And Bitcoin is by far the hardest money in the world, and that includes gold. It is just so much more hard and sound than gold and anything else. And all the wealth of the world is going to be sucked up by that asset. I mean, everything, because people are going to stop using other vehicles like real estate, even though real estate can be a good store of value, but you know, it's inflated, and people are going to stop using real estate as a store of their value, and they're going to go to Bitcoin. It's easier, and it's a better preservation of your hard-earned wealth, your value that you've accrued. And the fact
Bitcoin is the equalizer of the world's wealth.
That's right. And people store their wealth too, and not just the land, but the house And like, hey, look, houses, to use the stock to flow mechanism or metric, houses are going to get cheaper to produce. Like, we can see them. They're starting to print houses. Like, houses get more expensive. Hey, look, that stream of flow of houses is just going to get more and more steady, and that's going to drive down the cost of houses. So that's a terrible way to preserve your wealth. And then land in itself, the value of land, even though land is finite for now until we eventually go into space, but for now, land is finite. But those values are pressed up because of these modern monetary theory mechanisms and quantitative easing, and that basically incentivize people to just throw in all this printed money into assets like real estate, driving it up past its true value. And that's not just with real estate. Obviously, it's more so in other assets, our stock markets and everything. And eventually, brother, the bubble's going to pop. I mean, you can't keep it going but for so long. It's not economically sound what our current financial system's doing. But now you have a life raft. Bitcoin's here. No excuses. You got your life raft. So your savings, I would want it in the hardest money that protects your value the most from all these weapons being used against you, like inflation, taxation, and all these type of things. And the best way to protect yourself is with Bitcoin.
It takes people like us to go out and tell our loved ones and our friends and our families, the people we know, about Bitcoin.
That's right. And it's important to get people to understand. It's like, hey, look, this is not a fight that you can choose to be a part of or not. You're on this planet. You're a part of the human interaction, and economics and money transfer. Like, money is just enabling human value transfer. You're a part of this fight. Like, you're going to create value. You have to store it in something. You're a part of this fight. So
yeah, what's happening right now directly affects every part of your life.
Right. You're in the fight. It's just you have to choose. Like, are you going to fight for freedom? Are you going to pick up your Bitcoin, your arm of freedom, of monetary freedom? Are you going to pick that up and fight for freedom around the globe? Or are you just going to passively be a part of the tyrannical state and allow your value to just be stripped away from you constantly? And, to be stolen from you without your permission, to serve ends and purposes that are against your best interests. And that's the war we have going on. And you just got to pick what side you're on, really.
BlakkBull, man, I love your conviction. I love your story. And I love your opinions on America, the world, Bitcoin, and just everything that's going on right now, man. I think you have a great perspective. I think you have a great outlook on life. You have a strong faith, and it was very encouraging to spend some time with you and hear from you.
Hey, man, it was a lot of fun, and I'm just another pleb talking, and we all have amazing stories. There's just so many wonderful, intelligent, brilliant, strong people around. And that's the reason I got into this space, because one day I just kind of finally put my head up and realized that so many of the brilliant, principled people that I knew, they didn't just like this thing called Bitcoin. They were obsessed by it, right? And so that's what got me into it. So I just want to tip my hat and raise my glass to all those Bitcoin plebs out there. I love all y'all. We're fighting the good fight. It's a tough fight. We're going up against the most powerful freedom restricting institution in the world, but freedom wins, man. It's like the Spartan leader said, well, how come y'all win these battles, against forces way bigger than you are? And he said, well, in my experience, free men, they fight better, and that's what we are. We're free men. We're the free men of the world, and we're fighting for freedom all together, no matter where you are, whatever corner of the globe you are, no matter what you're facing. We're all together in this. We're fighting, and arm in arm. I'm so proud to share this field of battle with you. I love y'all. I tip my hat, raise my glass to you. And if you took the time to listen to my humble perspective, I really appreciate it. And I hope to hear your perspective soon. And please reach out to me at any time. I love connecting with any good free thinking Bitcoiner.
You guys heard it right here. That was BlakkBull. I'm super appreciative of him coming on my podcast and spending some time with them. This is Pleb Talk Podcast. Peace.